Hey y'all, episode, what is this? Cinco, number 5 of Who's Culture. I'm Nolan.
I'm Gal.
Happy day after Halloween, everybody.
I swear I'm not sitting here eating candy.
No, of course not. Of course not.
It's half off.
I don't blame you.
I did. I
I
stopped
don't believe you.
to go to get all kinds of half off candy.
Well, that's the thing to do. That's the smart thing to do. Especially in this economy.
Right.
One of the most overused jokes in Americana. So we have, as usual, a lot to talk about. We have that horrible attack in New York yesterday. That's what we're going to start off talking about. And of course, the media is talking all about how Muslims are coming to get us. Muslims, those awful Muslims. And you're the stat queen, Gal, so hit him with some actual knowledge of how likely we are to...
Oh God, you're 32 times more likely to be killed by a hardcore right-winger than to be killed by an Islamist.
Islamist?
That's the word they like to use.
I like that.
And yeah, it's ever since 2001, 83% of attacks have been by right-wing extremists. And the first thing that just gets me is if Stephen Paddock, and I don't like to repeat names, but I'm only going to say it this once, would have said Allah Akbar before he shot 604 people and killed 58 others 31 days ago today, people would still care about those victims. And nobody gives a shit about those victims. And even after the fact, when Trump said, we can't politicize this, because then that would bring up the gun debate, and we're not allowed to do that. But yet he politicizes this within an hour. It just, the hypocrisy.
That was quick. That was so quick. I'm not surprised, but that was...
It's just, I'm not surprised. It's pretty normal. But the hypocrisy is fucking astounding. That as soon as it's not a white male, we politicize the hell out of it. Let's change our immigration laws. Yet nobody will even touch the gun laws.
Not at all. Even though, like you said, white male, and especially a alt-white white male.
Charles did?
Yeah, and speaking of names, I will never say that Snowden's name again in my life. And him... In particular, there was a dude in, I think it was South Carolina, who was his name? Benjamin Thomas Samuel McDowell. This is back in February. He was planning a attack in the spirit of the Charleston shooting. And he thankfully was arrested, but that story went away very quickly.
Yep.
Which most of them do. Robert Doggett wanted to blow up a mosque, along with killing a lot of Muslim people in a Muslim community in the town of Islam. I didn't even know it was a town. Islamburg, New York. So that story went away really quickly. All of them do. But when white people actually do murder people in mass shootings or mass killings, it's the lone wolf. He wasn't hugged enough as a child, all that nonsense. And it's sad. It's calculated. It's expected at this point, but it's just sad.
It is. We've had 370 mass shootings this year, as of yesterday. 370.
Now I'm trying to count. I'm trying to remember my arithmetic from school. 370. That's more, I think, than the number of days in a year.
You are correct. There's 365 days in a year.
I was just checking. 370 mass shootings already in the United States. Jeez.
Yeah.
It's not even, it just got to November.
Yep, today is day 304 of the year, I believe. 305.
Jeez. And of course, at least 4 people were killed by the police yesterday.
Yep, we're at 993 for the year.
Now that's a lot more than 1 per day right there.
That's 3 per day. That's more than 3 per day.
Yeah. But you turn on the media, left or right leaning, and it's all, we know what his motive was. He was Muslim and is ISIS and this, that, and the other thing. And while that appears to be the case, right?
Yes.
That we don't say that for the lighter skinned folks, what their true motive was when they commit these crimes, and they're the most likely to commit these crimes.
Yeah.
Straight out white hypocrisy. It makes the country go round and round and round.
It helps keep that narrative going.
Oh, yes.
And this is all we'll hear about for a year.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and then let's talk about how the police officer is a hero for doing his job. It's his job. I don't understand. I do my job every day. I'm not a hero. Sorry.
You're probably pretty good. I don't hero or.
I'm not saying the person's not a hero. It's the way that we use the term, like the individual. So he did his job by not killing him. Thank God. I mean, I don't necessarily want to say thank God. That's different. But he didn't have to kill him. Didn't kill him. Immobilize him. He had a paintball gun and a pellet gun, is what I've read so far. I have not kept up to this like I normally would because I've been at work, but I have heard about the paintball gun and the pellet gun. So that means we don't have to have the gun control talk since he didn't have a real gun.
Good. Oh, good.
Right. So we don't have to politicize it, that way. Instead, let's just ban immigrants. Or I was forced to listen to part of the White House briefing today, and it was talking about, are we going to ban everybody from, is it Uzbekistan? Is that where he's from, I think? Yeah. And it's like, what the fuck? He was radicalized in the United States.
Well, they're going to use this as they're in the country. There are terror cells all over the country.
But there's also white nationalist cells all over. Oh, wait, that's not terrorism again. It's right. You're a terrorist. Remember that now, right?
I am the original BIE.
I hate saying that out loud. That you're
drops November 19th. Black Identity Extremist. Black Panther Records. I'm joking. Yeah, that it's racism is hypocrisy. That's what it is. It always has been. And I tweeted you taught me this stat on the People's Weekly, which is every Friday on People's Radio. United, only 24% of Arabs in America are Muslim. 35% are Catholic.
Yeah, that's one that a lot I was one of those things that I didn't know until I started teaching race and ethnicity in great detail and going into different groups because, of course, that's the problem. We lump so many people into one group and then stereotype, but not necessarily whites. We lump minorities into these groups so that we can just pack them away and have your model minority or have your any kind of stereotype that the media and politicians want to use. And that was one that stat always stuck with me because even I was under the impression nobody ever pointed it out to me. And it's one of those things as to all you know is what you see, unless you have a reason to go look for it. And so that's all I've ever seen on TV, in the movies, anytime people talk about it, is that Arabs are Muslim. But nope, not all of them. 25%, 24, 25%, right around there. It just depends on the year.
Well, from my standpoint, that goes back to Malcolm X, because once he came back from his pilgrimage to Mecca, he realized, wait a minute, there are all kinds of Muslims of all different races.
Exactly.
So it's just a complete false narrative that has been slammed down Americans' throats. And it's probably larger now, but tens of millions of dollars at least have been pumped in to the media, propaganda being bought by the GOP to publicize Islamophobia and indoctrinate Americans with Islamophobia.
Right, and you can see how pop culture plays a big part in this. One of our theories in sociology is called functionalism, and I'm not going to give a lecture on it, but it talks about pop culture villains and the way we've always had this history of molding certain groups into our villains by using them in books and comic books, and of course then when TV and movies come along, using them. So you can kind of go back and see, if you look at the late 40s and 50s, any enemy in a film, or I should say bad guy, right? Whoever the bad guy was supposed to be, was either A, native, cowboys and Indians, right? But if it was somebody who was outside of the country, or who was not an American, quote unquote, it was portrayed as German, Nazi. Okay? Now, that's directly after World War II, even during World War II. And so that was to keep that kind of propaganda flowing. And that's who the bad guys were, at least in our opinion. Still is, by the way. Not saying that that's not. I'm saying if we look at it this objectively as to how it's been portrayed. Then if you get into, really it's about the mid-60s, we start to see the change go towards anybody who is non-American and who is the bad guy is Russian. And that stays until the 90s.
Yes.
All the way till the end of the 90s. Actually, it goes all the way till 2001, and then what happens? 9/11. So then we start to see this change slowly, and then very quickly. And I say slowly because it took about a year, and then it was just every fucking movie that came out, right? Was the bad guy, if they were not American, was Arab, and then portrayed as Muslim. And we still see it. When it is somebody who is American, like I said, in the early, up until, when do we really start seeing Westerns go away? The mid-'80s?
Yeah, just about, maybe the 70s.
The late 70s? I mean, I can think of some that might have still come out, but they weren't as popular.
Does Blazing Saddles count as a
Well, I think Blazing Saddles was trying to make the same point we kind of are.
That is true.
And so you have natives, you have immigrants of whichever type of immigrant at the time was the quote-unquote, I hate using the term bad, but the immigrant, every group of immigrants have gone through this stage where they've seen as the enemy to the white American people. If you go back to 1860 to 1883, you've got you can find all kinds of newspaper ads on Chinese Americans being or Chinese immigrants being the enemy. And in 1882, we passed a law stating that 3 groups of people were not allowed into the United States for 10 years. And the 3 groups of people in the law were the idiots, the idiots, another word for idiot is actually what they use, and then the Chinese. So like the only group that was based on any kind of ethnicity was the Chinese. And then that law was repassed every 10 years for 60 years. And that's such an important thing people don't understand if we're going to look at the way immigration has always been treated in the U.S., especially based on race, because up until 1882, the United States begged Chinese immigrants to come here to help build the railroads.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know with immigration, especially in the 1860s and 1870s, you sent the father first. The father would stay here for possibly a decade before he's able to afford to bring the rest of his family here. And at that point in 1882, when that bill is signed through Congress, when it's passed, they are never allowed to see their family again because they're not allowed to leave the country either. And we have a very sordid history on just any group that was coming to the U.S. when it comes to the way they were treated by white Protestants. Because we see the same thing start to occur with the Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants. If you've ever seen Gangs of New York, they do a very good portrayal of the way Irish and Italian immigrants were treated in the the turn of the 20th century. Not considered white, even on the census, weren't considered white. Because they were not Protestant. They were not Eastern European. Western European, sorry. I'm horrible with directions. So then when you get to, of course, natives were always portrayed as bad, or the bad guy. Then you get people who are in poverty portrayed. That would be your pop culture villain as well. So then you can help force that narrative of the American dream and those who are in poverty deserve it. And then when you get to the 70s, well, really throughout all of history, we want to bring, African Americans in the way that obviously going back to Birth of a Nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of not even, we could talk about that all day.
Which
and then
has got 100, has 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. Birth of a Nation, one of the most racist films of all time.
Yep.
Put that in there. People forget that. Helps re-spark the Klan. Thanks again, Woodrow Wilson.
Yep. The Klan did not burn crosses. The director of that film wanted to use burnt crosses because he thought that it looked good on screen, and that's what actually made the Klan start burning crosses. Thank you.
Thank you, America, as always, for being so nice to us.
Right.
Which is ironic, the thing about if you're not a white American or European, you're portrayed so often throughout American entertainment as evil in movies. And yet, in Seinfeld, and I talk about this all the time, they're nothing but white people, aside from a couple caricatures. And this dude who committed the attack yesterday was in Manhattan, living in Manhattan. So, which is it? That's, again, racism is hypocrisy. But which is it? Which one are you going to go with here, white folks? Come on. Should we play the anthem now? No. Joking. Of course not. Then that's a whole nother discussion on what things actually mean. What does the anthem actually mean? Well, we watched a new television show, Gal and I.
Shit, I'm muted. No wonder you can't hear me.
I
wanted to say something before you. Yeah, I was trying to talk. It wasn't your fault. I was muted. I wanted to talk about one thing before you go on there, because going back to how important it is for media representation, which is what we talk about every week. And of course, as you said, even with Seinfeld, it's just portrayed as all white. And we've come to this kind of melting pot of white people, just white people. Now, a melting pot means everybody, is treated equally. A melting pot of white people we've ultimately seen over the last 100 years. And then anybody who's not white is now considered not only statistically the minority, but the way portrayed in the media. And there is a graph that I use, or it's called Stereotyping in the 21st Century. It's a table that I use in my class. And it says, when asked to identify the role a person of a particular ethnic or racial background would be playing in a movie or on television, teenagers cited familiar stereotypes. And this is based on a national survey of children between the ages of 13 and 18. So for African American, the media roles that were identified were athlete, gang member, and police officer. For Arab American, the media roles identified were terrorist and convenience store clerk. Those were the only two. For Asian American, you have physician, lawyer, CEO, and factory worker, which I find very interesting, even on the class aspect, right? You go from CEO to factory worker. Hispanic, you get gang member or factory worker. There's no in between, just those two. Irish American, which I found interesting because of what I had just said, that we've kind of melted all white ethnicities together to what we call symbolic ethnicity. But Irish American, the teenagers said that they were portrayed as drunkards, police officers, or factory workers. Italian Americans, now this would be a typical stereotype that you would think of, right? A crime boss, organized crime, The Sopranos, that type thing. And a restaurant worker was the other one. Jewish American, physician, lawyer, CEO, and teacher. And then Polish American, which always stands out to me because I don't think that I have ever been watching TV or a movie and thought, hey, look at that Polish American. Never in my life. And then the only thing they even have there is factory worker. And I think that most of when surveys like that are given, they have to choose one. And I'm pretty sure that they just chose that because can you think any time of a movie where they're like, look at that Polish person?
Unless it's about Hitler's Holocaust.
Right. And I'm talking about, these are all going to be looking about in America, and it's more recent. So, I mean, at least with like Irish American, I can think of like The Departed, right? Or Boston, anything in Boston.
Family Guy.
Yeah, you can see that exactly. Italian American, like I said, Sopranos. Jewish American brought up plenty of times, but Polish American always stood out to me because I'm just like, I can't think of one instance where that's been relevant to anything.
It's so interesting. Another reason why I hate the term African American. White people will go out of their way to define themselves in the best light and give them as much culture as possible. Polish American, Italian American. Yeah, let's just jumble Africa into one continent.
Right.
And again, this is Jesse Jackson's fault, mind you. Okay, this is Jesse's fault. He's the one who coined it. But 54 nations in Africa, but we're just going to jumble it into one continent. And I'm not Asian, so
that's a very generational belief. I just like you to know that's a very generational belief.
Oh, I've
done a lot of surveys on that myself personally, and a lot of research on it, on the different terminology between Black, African American, and Negro. And anybody who was of age pre-civil rights movement in the 60s usually wanted to be called Negro because that's what they were socialized with, right?
Mm-hmm. Also, it means Black and Spanish.
Absolutely. And then from about the mid-60s until even after that really was what we see, but it's somewhere between about the 70s and 80s, we start to see the term Black. And then in the 80s, we start to see, and I'm just going based on how Black individuals label themselves based on when they came of age to be an adult, to where they could, understand understand what was going on. And then from about 1990 on, it becomes African American. And then in 2010, we start to see it return back to Black with millennials coming of age.
God.
And it's interesting, though, because it's so generational, but it makes so much sense when you look at the socialization behind it.
Yeah, and my father told me, he's taught me so much about my culture, but one thing he said always stuck out to me. He said the term African American set us back 40 years because it erases slavery. It's just all right, just one continent, and then it puts the term American on us, yet we're not treated as citizens. We're not treated as Americans.
Absolutely.
To paraphrase Malcolm X. And Black is, we're we're black. Negro to me is 100 times better than African American because just by straight definition in Spanish, Negro means black. It's just when you hear the thing is, if you hear a white person call a black person Negro, that is racist because in their mind, they're not thinking logically. They're just thinking, well, that's an old term, back in the day. They're Negroes, or the N-word. But Negro, that's, if I'm with other black friends in private, yeah, my Negro. Because it's simplistic. It's Negro means black. African American is complicated colonialism. There's a little alliteration for you as we go into our next topic. So how many episodes of this show did you watch?
One, and I didn't even get to the interview because I was just like, oh God, I need to. My first thought within a minute and a half of that first song was Nolan has to watch this. We have to talk about this.
Boy. Oh boy, it was just so. Oh boy, jeez. That song too. I'll tell you something. She said it wasn't. I guess it's not in every episode. It was just in the first one. But she's singing this song, "I Love America," "I Love Americans," whatever the hell she was saying, and she says, "I love Haitians." All right, no, she says that, and I quote. I wrote it down. "I love you if you're Haitian." Now, this is the same woman who stood in front of the Democratic National Convention and told people to support Hillary Clinton, who, with her husband, has decimated Haiti beyond recognition. But Sarah says, "I love you if you're Haitian."
So do you want to tell the listeners what we're talking about?
Sarah Silverman has a new television show. Sarah Silverman. That's how angry I am. And it's also, take the racism out. It's not a good show. Like,
it's Sarah cringy.
Show, it's cringy. It's on Hulu. Don't watch it. Or watch it. I don't care. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's called "I Love You, America" with Sarah Silverman.
Mm-hmm. The episode I watched was with Al Franken. Speaking of Hillary's stance, and the funniest thing about that episode I watched didn't even come from Sarah. It came from this skit with Tig Notaro, very, very talented comedian, and she was training to become an auctioneer. And there was one scene in a car she was driving, and she was just naming random shit that she drove past while she talked really fast. I thought that was pretty funny. But the rest of the episode was like, what? I want my time back.
Right, where she goes to, what was it, New Orleans, to try to understand and empathize with Trump supporters.
No, I didn't get that. Well, no, that
was the first. That was the very first episode.
Because all the ads I kept seeing on Facebook were Franken.
So I watched the very first episode, which had the song in it. So maybe she does have that song. Maybe that's her theme song. She goes and spends, I don't know really how long, talking to a family. She spends a couple days with a family of Trump supporters.
Couple days.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And she asks them questions, and it is quite interesting to see this kind of perspective, because as she's asking them questions, of course they're saying the typical, Trump supporter bullshit, which is, we have all these people on welfare, they're lazy, and then she asks something and they're like, well, I've been unemployed for 3 years, I'm on unemployment. It was she did show the hypocrisy of it, but she was too nice with it, and it was like, that's not gonna. She didn't even call them out on it. She's just like, oh, really?
Of course not.
And she was like, well, what do you think about Obamacare? And you get the typical Trump supporter response on that. We need Trump to, fix that and repeal it. And then they were like, well, what do you have? And they're like, well, we have the Affordable Care Act, which, as we already know, 63% or 65, or it might even be more than that. It's been so long since I've seen that number of Republicans didn't realize that they were the same thing. And so it was just like, I understand that you're trying to, the idea is that we have to come together as Americans and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not going to call them out for their hypocrisy, then they're not going to see it. And they don't care. Then you're not bringing it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to be an asshole about it. Do you know how much I do this on my day-to-day basis? I'm not an asshole about it. It's like, hey, let's talk about this. You can have a conversation with it, but just ignoring it isn't helping it either. So I turned it off after that.
This is, I think, most people don't understand. This is who she is. This is what Sarah Silverman is about. And this is a woman who had a special called Jesus is Magic, and she did a song in that special. And there's a line at the end of the song, Jewish people driving German cars. It's the opposite of FUBU, but maybe it's Patty Hearst siding with her kidnappers. Maybe it's South African miner killing diamond-wearing gangster rappers. Maybe it's like when black guys call each other niggers, cha, cha, cha. And in the music video, she's standing in front of three brothers who look like gangsters. This is Sarah Silverman. This is... and we were having a discussion before the show, and we're kind of getting into that right now already. I call it liberalism because that's what it is in the mainstream. If you want to come up with a different word for left-leaning, democratic supporting people, Democratic Party.
I call them fake allies.
Fake allies. That could work. That's a lot less catchy, though. Liberalism, liberal. Because I think that also is, you can trace that to conservatives, like the liberals.
Yeah, liberal tears.
Today on the O'Reilly Factor, damn liberals. He got his show back.
I know.
He got his show back. But to the, okay, well, I'll humor you. We'll call them fake allies for now. Now, the show also, again, Franken was on it. I remember Franken tweeting out something a few weeks ago. He was talking about how it's an injustice what Native women and girls have to go through in Minnesota and in general. And I'm like, is he serious? He just sits in Congress all day not doing anything about it, pretending it doesn't happen. And then he's tweeting about it. And this is the same guy who helped campaign for Hillary Clinton and is a friend of Hillary Clinton, who supported the she had like a no contest type of stance against the Dakota Access Pipeline. She was like, well, it's like Trump when he says both sides are at fault. It's kind of like that. And I was watching a clip from Bill Maher, he still has a show, which is amazing.
The fakest ally.
He was, fake is the word. And this is from like 10, 15 years ago. He was talking about the N-word, which he has absolutely no license to talk about, but, white privilege. And there was a black woman on the show, a black actor who was a woman. And he was trying to explain to her why it's okay for white people to use the N-word. And then he said the N-word like 5 times.
Yeah. Can I just correct you on something?
Go ahead.
When you said that Al Franken just sits in the Senate and does nothing, he's actually got a bill to amend the Indian Civil Rights Act of 1968. He sponsored it to extend the jurisdiction of tribal courts to cover crimes involving sexual violence and for other purposes. So he's the first one that's actually brought that to the attention. That's why he was tweeting about it.
I always find that interesting because there was I cannot remember her name. There was a woman who in Congress who put out a bill similar to that, at least in terms of supporting Native people. And the same person co-authored a bill for the Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah.
So, like with Franken, okay, here's something good, and then 900 things bad. Yeah. Well,
no, he's got a good voting record.
Well, but like, what does that exactly mean? Like, I'm positive I could go back and find him voting on Bill A or Bill B, whether it's something to help Israel or adding to the military budget.
Yeah, and that's going to come down to what we were talking about with perception, absolutely, on what I consider good versus like what you would consider good. So then, yeah, it would have to come down to actually going and looking at it and judging it on oneself.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is the perfect example of this. He is like the white savior of this generation, who didn't get to be the white savior because he was robbed of the election, which he was robbed of the Democratic nomination. But granted, if you look back further, he's had some illegal activity in his own state elections to help him in Vermont. But I digress. Now, Sanders put up a bill to help Native people, and good. But then you look at the 30 years of him in Congress, why only one bill? These people are killed by the police more than any other, at a higher rate than any other race in the country. They live in poverty all over the ones who live on the reservations live in utter poverty. Most of them. You talk about Pine Ridge, especially, to 80 to 90% unemployment. And you have also Bernie Sanders saying things like "White Lives Matter." Right. Bernie Sanders saying his two heroes are white supremacists. He didn't say that, but they are, or were. They're dead now, thank God. FDR and Winston Churchill.
Oh, I have nothing positive to say about Bernie. I was just bringing up Franken's native resolution bill that he's trying to get passed. They're not all great, believe me. It's just like any other politician.
Yeah, we have one. That's a nice thing. It's like the carrot stick. Like, oh, here's one little nice thing to keep you in, to support this party. Here's, I grew up with nothing but...
I don't know. Do you know everything that goes into sponsoring a bill and how to get it involved? It takes more than just one person.
Oh,
There's an actual process.
It's very difficult. But then there's also effort. And then there's the other thing. If you really want to help marginalized people, you do not become a politician.
See, I see it the opposite way.
Okay, well...
As a sociologist, that would be the only way in a system that we're in at this point.
Okay, name me...
I didn't say it was good.
Straight, black, or... Because these are the two most marginalized people in the country. Of the two groups, name me a couple folks of black or indigenous descent who were great activists / politicians.
Do you only want national?
No, I'm talking
local
about America.
Level. Bruce Franks in St. Louis. I can do this with St. Louis. I can give you all kinds of names. Bruce Franks Jr. You've got Senator Maria Chappelle Nadell. You've got Senator Nassid. You've got we can.
Wait, is that the one in Seattle?
No. St. Louis is the ones I was.
Okay, my fault. Okay.
That are doing fantastic things, going from the activist level to the politician level.
I'll give you that because I can speak to this in person like you can. I have met local politicians of color who are actively trying to help their people. But then, and I think we've had this discussion on the People's Weekly, once you get to that national level, it's like your soul gets sucked out of your body.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's because of money in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you for a fact, based on voting records, that is a one-party voting thing.
To protect the
Meaning
party.
which is the Republicans. The Democrats have voted over and over to get money out of it. And I have receipts.
No, by comparison, yes. The Koch brothers, those are hardcore conservatives.
It still doesn't mean that it's right, and it doesn't mean, believe me, I can tell you that. Because when you're in this situation at this point, what you have to look at is the only way to change the system is to play the system. The only way you can get into the system is with money. So until you get money out of politics, which is going to take a massive Supreme Court ruling, which is never going to happen, as we've already seen with Citizens United, then you have to continue to have money if you want to continue to run. And if you want to continue to run, that's to try to get any kind of changes. But that's not going to work with the gerrymandering that we have, as we know. And it's just going to continue to go downhill from here.
So you're of the collective that believes that you have to get into the system to actually well, I shouldn't say that, because
based on history, and not just American history, based on all history. Yeah.
Well, how many slaves were politicians?
That.
Right. There's that narrative that Lincoln freed us. We freed ourselves with some help of some legitimate allies and abolitionists. John Brown being one of them.
You're absolutely right. But until it was written into the law by a politician, it was still legal. That's the problem. And I agree that the system has to change and we should start anew. It's just, it's not going to happen. That's a pipe dream. That's something that's just not possible. And the only thing we can do is to continue to change the system that we fucking have, which is ridiculous. And I agree with that 100%.
And to the system, I just did a quick Google search. Al Franken, at multiple times, supported the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm. Oh. He also voted yes on the defund Planned Parenthood.
So the national level, you're not going to find any good ones. Local level, you will find a number of them.
Again, good is a perception.
Well,
value.
I couldn't.
I know that we don't agree on this. It's wonderful.
Oh well, it's the first. I think it's the first time. It's the first time on the show we've actually had an argument.
I'm not arguing. It's a discussion.
Well,
I look at different things like where people
need
absolutely
time.
I focus on actual voting records. So if we look at something like the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, you've got it almost strictly down party lines. And this was back in 2012 or 2013. It would have been before. Oh, this would have been 2010 because it would have been before Congress switched to being more Republican. But you have it almost straight down party lines. 57 Democrats voted for the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. That's the act that was to make it equal pay for equal work for women. That's the whole act if you read the entire thing. Where it was voted against by 36 Republicans and four Republicans voted for it. And you can continue to go through Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Bureau Act in order to actually have some kind of restrictions on the banks and Wall Street. Almost strictly down party lines. 55 Democrats for, 2 against. 4 Republicans for, 39 against. You can go through this with everything from the last 10 years and see that the parties, they aren't the same. That reduces funding for food stamps. Republicans for, 33 against 13. Democrats for, 0, 52 against. We can do this with so many of them to look that. Now, it may not be, I'm not looking at the individuals.
Yeah, so you're looking
at the party and how they vote.
Right. You're looking at one versus the other. I'm looking at, let's separate them and look at each one as it is.
Individuals in politics can't get anything done. They have to work
No,
together.
well, yeah. Yeah.
Habeas corpus for detainees of the United States. Democrats voted for 50, against 0. Republicans 5-4, 42 against habeas corpus.
And we actually discussed this right before the show. Democrats passed, in my opinion, the worst act of black genocide in the last 20 or 30 years, the crime bill.
Yep.
And in that crime bill, it blocks habeas corpus for quote-unquote convicted criminals, whether they did anything or not. And I have a friend on death row who was within less than 4 hours of being executed. Thankfully, he is still living, and sadly, he's on death row. His name is Kevin Cooper. And Democrats passed that bill.
That was a bipartisan bill. Absolutely, we see bipartisan bills.
More Dems voted yes on that. You had Joe Biden wrote the bill. Clinton's.
Oh, I'm not going to argue on it. I can tell you the historical act. Yeah, I know the issue with that very well. I teach it every single. I'm teaching it right now. As a matter of fact, just started it today. The negative effects of the crime bill. I'm really only ones I was even going back as far to is 2010 because we can do it all the way back to 1940 with an FDR.
But by comparison,
but I'm sticking with modern history.
So
how it's affecting us today, which that still absolutely affects us today.
That it does. But looking at one versus the other, obviously Democrats are better than Republicans by and large. If you just look at one alone, like, okay, here's Democrats, here's their party, here's Republicans, the other party. They're both from Satan's front door. You had COINTELPRO. I'll go back and then forward. You had COINTELPRO, authorized by Eisenhower, continued under the Kennedys, and I mean Kennedys because RFK was in the cabinet of JFK, and then LBJ. And King killed, Malcolm X killed, Peltier imprisoned, and then, of course, Nixon. Now, you have wars funded by both parties. You have military funded up the wazoo by both parties. Even the most quote-unquote liberal people. You have Trump's own supporters. I'm sorry, not Trump. You have Trump's own people he put into his cabinet, appointed by Democrats. Tim Kaine, VP, would have been voted for 5 of Trump's appointments. Al Franken voted for 4.
Yep.
Feinstein, the devil woman that she is, voted for 5. Kamala Harris, 3. Warren, 2. Liz Warren. Bernie Sanders, 2. And Gillibrand, 1. This is American politics. Left, right, center, middle, northeast, whatever. It's toxic. I'm speaking at the national level. When you get local, you can have legitimate people with good hearts who want to help people. But when you get that, you step into Washington, there's a toll you have to pay, and that toll is your soul. And I will call, and I do it all the time, and I get in trouble for it. I will call out my own people for supporting either side. There are a few black Republicans, one in Trump's cabinet, Uncle Ben Carson.
10% of Republicans are black.
That's far too many.
1 out of 10, yeah.
That is far too many.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it's 25% are Hispanic.
That's
let me check. let me change that. Okay, I've made that backwards. 10% of African Americans or Black people, sorry, we just discussed this, are Republicans. 25% of Hispanics are Republicans. That's the way it should be stated.
Mm-hmm. And both sides. You have someone like LeBron James who will call out Trump at a moment's notice, yet campaigned for Hillary Clinton and even spoke at one of her events. And Trump, if anybody who doesn't know, Trump actually funded multiple Hillary Clinton campaigns, donated to multiple campaigns, one for president, one for Senate. So lesser of two evils, yeah, at least in that respect of the election, at least. I mean, well, if you want to grade it and argue who one's worse than the other, all right, well, one's 98% evil, the other's 97.2% evil. I mean, you know. And you have John Lewis in Congress, who was an activist, a black activist of his day, a revolutionary. This is something I call myself, the work that I do. Yet somehow along the way, he became a congressman, U.S. congressman, and started supporting the hell of his own people, and also campaigned for Hillary Clinton. And one thing I cannot stand, anybody in Congress, green, black, red, white, whatever, Democrat, Republican, Independent, there is a microphone in Congress. You can say whatever you want. You could talk about your children for 15 hours straight. Filibuster whatever bill is going on. In fact, the Senate filibustered against the Civil Rights Act for 3 weeks. Yet there's a microphone there, and they won't talk about what's happening to Native people, and they won't call it a genocide. They won't call what's been happening to my people for just as long in this country. They won't call that a genocide. They'll defend the police, but they won't talk about the people that the police kill. And that election, that was one of the worst. That was an ordeal. I don't care if you're whatever party or ideology. That was an ordeal of an election. And all throughout the election, at least on the blue side, the Democratic side, you had Mr. Sanders and Mrs. Clinton pretend to care about black lives, at least for Hillary. I don't remember her once saying the word Native or Indigenous. You had Bernie pretend to care about black and Native people and people of color. And we're killed on a daily basis. This has been going on for 5 centuries. So there's a lot of names, even in that election cycle. And I remember watching, this was one of the last times I ever watched MSNBC. So watching Chris Matthews, and he had Hillary on, and it was during the election. And there was a 15-year-old black kid named Jarvis Scruggs who got killed by the cops that day. She didn't say his name once. They just talked about the election and Bernie and Trump and all that. You know, I never heard Bernie say Sarah Lee Circlebear's name, a Native woman who died in jail after her jail officers said she was faking chest pains. I've never heard Al Franken go up to the Congress mic and say, "Yo, let's get Leonard Peltier out of prison. This is ridiculous. Let's get Mamiya out of prison." They're just silent. They're spineless, silent politicians. That's why I look at my own ancestors and all the ones that I look at from that perspective of, look what they did for us. Look, they and look how hard they fought for us. I can't remember any politicians. Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Angela Davis, which she's thankfully still alive. Kathleen Cleaver, God bless her soul, still alive. Eldridge ran for president. I think, did he run for... Eldridge Cleaver became a Republican. For anybody who knows anything about the Black Panther Party. That kind of proves my point. Like, once you jump in, and Eldridge, I don't consider, this is a tangent, but Eldridge beat Kathleen. I'm not a huge, giant fan of Eldridge. But to my point, we got, at least from my end, it's go at the system. And to your point, Gal, I will say, yeah, while tweaking it, I just don't enter that door. Don't enter that Washington door. It's just so problematic. And
I just tweeted out why representation matters according to our Senate and House, and I tweeted out it was replying to one of yours. Excuse me, so you should have it. But it's a graph that I made for my classroom to show the race and ethnic representation in House and in the Senate. And you'll see that 79% of our House, and this is this year, so this is this House of Representatives, 79%, which is 343, are white. Compare that to 63% of the population is white. 8% is Hispanic. Compare that to 17.7% is Hispanic. 10% is black. Compare that to 13% is black. 3% is Asian. Compare that to 4.4% is Asian. And then if you go to the Senate, you'll see 90% is white, 4% Hispanic, 3% black, and 3% Asian. And then you can even go, if you want to start looking, like I also sent you, I have sexuality, I have gender, and I have
we got a
religious.
Four-rung spectrum here. 91% of the Senate is Christian, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Especially because they're mostly white Christians.
Exactly. And right now I'm going to tweet out the gender and sexuality as well, because it's just as important.
No Muslims in the House.
No.
Okay, no way. Two Muslims in the House? 0 point. It's under 1%.
Yeah, it's under 1%. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, the Ellison is Keith Ellison is Muslim, I believe. Senator of Minnesota. 1% Buddhist.
Yeah, I don't even know who that is. I need to find that. I used to know. When I made it, I knew. I just don't know. It was back in January. There.
Well, a lot happened in January.
A lot has happened since January.
Yeah.
There you go. I just tweeted out the gender and sexuality as well, because it's so important for representation.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Was it 3 black women are in the Senate? Only 3?
Yep, I think that's right.
And of those 3, my blood turns cold. So it's like I don't know. It's like to me, it's a double-edged sword. It's like, yes, don't we need more color, in politics, so for power, but then they're going to turn the other side if it's, U.S. senators or U.S. congressmen or president of the United States who calls black children gun-toting criminals and gives the police more money than any other president in U.S. history. A conundrum would be an understatement of describing this quagmire that we have here.
It's even worse when it comes to gender, though. You got to figure 51% of the U.S. is women and 49% are men, but 81% of the House is men, 19% are women, and when it comes to the Senate, 79% are men and 21% are women.
21%. Jeez.
And that's who gets to make our laws.
Yeah. I think that goes, that we could sum this particular topic up by going, well, we need to fix the system in terms of the lacking representation. I didn't see any transgender people or homosexuals in there.
Yes, there are homosexuals.
There are wait a minute. We really in Congress?
Gender.
That's kind of.
Yes, yeah. The House of Representatives, there are 6 individuals who are LGBT. They identify as part of the LGBT community.
Wow.
I may not know their exact sexuality, but they identify themselves as part of the LGBT community. Like I said, that's 6 out of 495?
Yeah.
That's 1%. And then in the Senate, it is 1. One person.
I've got to look that up now.
I know, I do too, because like I said, I had all these names, and now, like I said, I made it in January. It's been a while. I don't even know who that one is.
Anybody listening, tweet it in, for goodness sake. Oh, okay. Wait.
Tammy Baldwin.
Tammy Baldwin.
Wait, that was the worst. That was the first, not worst. That was horrible. Gal, the first person. Hold on.
Oh, so she's not. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
That'd be a trick if she came back and won another election after she died. That'd be. Or is she dead?
No. She's still alive. Wisconsin.
She's still alive. Okay. So we're going into all kinds of. We don't know what we're talking about.
No, she's still in office. Okay.
She's still. So it's her.
That would be senator.
It's her. Okay. Tammy Baldwin is
Wisconsin?
A senator from Wisconsin. I'm just reading the Wikipedia page, people.
Is she still in the Senate? Because I'm trying to put it together.
Oh, she's a junior state senator from Wisconsin, member of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, she's still
She's
there.
also the secretary of the Senate Democratic Conference. Again, I'm just reading the things. I forget that. Exiting out of that. Back to the show that we're doing live. Well, that's the quandary. That's like, we need more marginalized people in politics because that's who makes the decisions. But at the same time, if they go into Washington, they go to that evil side, and it's like, well, they can help 1 time out of 10. It's a whole thing.
I've got the 6 white
of the House?
individuals of the House. Oh, wait, one Mark Takano is the first non-white openly LGBT person to be elected to Congress. He is Asian, and he is a Democrat from California. We've got Jared Poles, who is a Democrat from Colorado, first gay man to be out at the time of his election, first gay parent in Congress. This is present. These are the present people that are still in Congress. You got David Cicilline, who is a Democrat from Rhode Island. New York Democrat Sean Patrick Maloney. Wisconsin Democrat is Mark Pocan, first openly gay member to immediately succeed another openly gay member. And, okay, so Tammy Baldwin was originally in the House. Now she's in the Senate, I see. And then,
keep going.
And the last is a Democratic woman from Arizona who is the first openly bisexual person in the Congress. Oh, did not know that. Her name is Kirsten Sinema.
Okay, so we have I'm looking at a bill, September the 18th, 2017. That's when it was voted on, and it passed. This is more money for the Department of Defense military complex. Miss Baldwin voted yes. She voted yes. She's voted yes. Give more money to the military that are killing innocent people all over the world. She went over to the other side.
That's not technically the other side, though, Nolan.
Well,
that's both sides on that one, because that's where it comes down to. You will absolutely never get elected again if you vote no.
Well, that's
in
what I'm
those
saying.
Areas.
Don't go into Washington politics. Stay out, because she voted to have people killed. People are going to die because people have already died because of that bill.
I understand, and I can see the
Syria,
other side as well. That
Africa.
I completely agree with you. I think that we should. We have plenty of money in the military, and it should be not defunded, but it shouldn't be continuously.
It should
be money can be taken away from there.
More expensive than any other country.
Less than 10%. We would only need 10% for healthcare for everybody of the military spending.
That bill, if I'm not mistaken, that bill would have paid for free college.
Yeah.
So that's.
But that goes against our capitalistic values.
There you go. See,
That's communism.
I can't support any capitalists. I don't care of any creed. I can't do that. But here, one person who was not a capitalist, and we're going to have a guest on in about 10 minutes to speak on this, was Nat Turner. He was not a capitalist. And I've been thinking a lot about Mr. Turner of late, because you get to a point, especially as a black or indigenous person, where you're pushed so far into the breaches of sanity, the edges of sanity by white folks and this society that they have put over our heads. And if you don't know the story of Nat Turner, he staged a slave rebellion, in the first half of the 19th century. And he killed a whole lot of white people. And that included women and children. And that's a tough pill to swallow. I don't care whatever side you're on. Even today, there are pro-slavery people. But if you were of that day and you supported slavery, or you didn't, if you're for Black lives, if you're not, etc. Children killed. He killed children. But then, and there's a but, the horrors of slavery, and even to this day, Black life or indigenous life in America, and also there were millions of indigenous slaves in the Americas during slavery, it gets to the point where it's too much to bear. And I'm not saying I will ever pull a Nat Turner and just go postal on a whole bunch of white folks. But I get it. I completely understand it. He was told he was less than nothing. His own mother contemplated killing him as a child to save him from the horrors of slavery, which was not an uncommon practice of the day. Black mothers who were slaves would kill their children to prevent them from going through the horrors of slavery and being a slave. I mean, they cut our balls off. They hung us from trees. They burned us alive. They whipped our backs until you saw bone. And to this day, there is $70+ billion in the prison industrial complex where we are modern slaves. We just had a brother in jail die. I can't remember, some kind of work, prison detail outside prison, and he died doing that work. And in my state of California, this is not where he died, we're fighting fires as prisoners. So the horrors of being of African descent or indigenous descent will make you, I'll just say, really dislike white people. And the funny thing for me is white people are the ones committing by wide majority, far-reaching majority of the mass killings, mass shootings. And this goes back all the way to Columbus, where he was responsible for about 15 million deaths. But they're the ones committing the mass killings, but they're driving us crazy and putting us through this hell. But they're the ones doing it, not us. But to me, that goes to our restraint. Our patience for what we've had to put up with is unmatched on this earth. But I get it. I understand why Nat Turner did what he did. And at the same time, it helped the anti-slavery movement, because it showed other slaves like, hey, we're not subhuman. Let's put up a fight, or let's escape. Let's end this. It's a very, very horrendous reality that America is in general. Because if you are white and you are a true ally, you look at this and you go, geez. And I'm a man, so I get that as well. If you're an ally or a true ally of a marginalized group of people, well, look at women. Like, we treat women horribly. And I'm just like, man, what is wrong with us? So as a white person, what is wrong with us? And you see all this horrible shit going down that the group that you're a part of keeps committing. Yet at the same time, and I'm sure you have too, met a black person who just hates white people. But you can't blame them. You can't blame us for hating a white person. You can't blame a woman for hating a man. Because of all the shit that they're put through. And in case of white people, we're put through. But it's about that restraint. And just, some of it's sucking it up and just dealing with it. Some of it is humility. Some of it is having a sense of humanity for your fellow man of any creed. But it's a horrendous reality, then and now. And we have a guest coming on in the next minute. And she's one of my favorite people in the world.
She's been a guest before, hasn't she?
She has been a guest before. She was on episode, was it 2 or 3?
2. It was 2.
We've done so many of these.
I know, right? Is she going to help us kick people out of Hollywood? Because I'm ready.
Oh, yes. We still have to do that.
Mine's going to be obvious, though. And it's probably going to be what we're talking about anyway, so I'll just wait.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll have a trio of who we're kicking out of Hollywood. So, but you can find her on Twitter at Viva La Diva Tracy, VIVALA Diva Tracy with a Y. Tracy, are you there?
I'm here.
How are you doing, sister?
How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
Okay.
Well, let's start talking.
What are we talking about? I'm ready.
That's what we want to hear.
Nolan just gave a powerful monologue, and I was just listening.
I was actually listening in, and then the stream just stopped. It just went silent.
That was COINTELPRO 2017. That was the Black identity extremist line that they cut.
So I missed about the last 5 minutes.
Well, I started talking about Nat Turner, and the last thing I was talking about with that, I appreciate praise Gal with that little rant, was how Black people and Indigenous people in America have a little of Nat Turner in all of us, but we don't get to the point that he did because of our restraint.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at Nat, I mean, what do you think of looking back and also living in the society that you live in now as a Black woman?
I think, genuinely speaking, people don't want to set out to kill people. Nat Turner, I mean, his history is there for anyone to read. And I think that we really just want to live and be equal and be left alone. The goal is to be free, to be liberated. The goal really doesn't set out to just, I want you dead. And I think most people don't want to see mass death. So when you use the word restraint, I don't know that that's the word that I would use, because I think it's just inherent in people not to go around and kill people who aren't immediate threats to you. And I think that's just how society has taught people to be. Now, that's not to say that it wouldn't be deserved or warranted. I mean, hundreds of years of mass death and genocide, you can absolutely justify any means necessary to obtain your freedom. I think the restriction, why people don't come together and do, quote unquote, what was done to them, is simply because most people just don't inherently choose to kill. And we have seen some really horrendous actions with death, even today with the Rohingya genocide.
Mm-hmm.
There are, mobs of people killing because of a religious and ethnic difference. That's not I don't believe that is inherent in people, though. I don't believe people wake up and grow up and believe, I want to go out and kill you because you're different. And I think that's why we don't see what you were talking about in terms of Nat Turner.
Right.
If I understood the question correctly.
No, you got it. And you said something that interests me when you said people who aren't an immediate threat. Now,
which is different for everybody.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think in my head as myself. I know the stats. I know the science. I know close to the percentages of how much of white America does not like me, is fine with me being harmed or killed. But then that's not all of white folks, of course. Mm-hmm. So, speaking from a scientific point of view, it's about over two-thirds of white America is racist. So if you put three white people in front of you, you're walking down the street, you see three. Well, in my mind, well, there's two. And I'm not saying this is how I think on a daily basis when I'm out in public. I'm just speaking out loud here. There's two. Well, geez, those two want to hurt me. And then thinking is not like, I've been put in jail because of my skin color. My cousin is dead because of her skin color. So could you speak more on that? Like, people who want to harm you.
Right. I think that that is a perception that's going to be different for everybody. I know that as I've become more critical and more alert, and let me keep in mind that a lot of what I have learned has been in the last 3 to 5 years. I went to an HBCU, never heard any of this. Have a background in sociology, never heard anything about the conversations that I see online today. But getting back to your question, I believe that perception, feeling, those are things that will differ. So, and it also depends on where you are and what your life experiences have been. Generally speaking, walking down the streets of Nashville, I don't feel unsafe anywhere at 3:00 in the morning, but I'm not a scary person. I'm not afraid of confrontation. I'm not afraid of putting my foot down and standing up for myself. That does not mean that when I go places and I'm the lone person of color, that I'm not uncomfortable and that I'm not more alert of my surroundings, especially if I'm by myself. So for there to be 3 white people in my vicinity in and of itself doesn't raise alarm bells for me on a daily basis. Now, for me to be in an interview and I see no black people in the entire office, I have a problem. That's a red flag for me. I would not accept the job offer unless I was really desperate. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think it's really subjective and depends on each person, whether or not they feel like someone's an immediate threat to them. I have been called the N-word with the hard ER by black people that made me more uncomfortable and made me feel unsafe because of the context and the location, body position, facial expression, than perhaps a white coworker that I've worked with before. So I really think, like I said, it just depends on where you are, who you are, and what your experiences are.
And thankfully, we're not in the exact same spot that Nat was, which obviously has a lot to do with it. We don't have literal chains on our feet or our necks. And one thing about Nat, after he was captured, and it actually took a couple months to capture him. They mutilated his body. They took off his head, dismembered the corpse. Absolutely no respect for his body. And the Nazis in World War II, a lot of them were either cremated or just put in a grave, body untouched. That goes to, obvious anti-blackness, inherent anti-blackness and racism. But there's that utter disregard for our humanity that we still fight for on a daily basis. And that restraint, well, at least me calling it restraint, and let's put aside, actually killing white people. Hopefully we all magically get free and no violence happens. Even though we all on the show know better. But just from being in the society that we're in, when white folks push your buttons on and especially as a black woman. I mean, as a black man, shit is hard. As a black woman, like, crank that up even further. How do you deal with it? Do you just...
It depends on where it depends on where I am. So, for example, the last job that I had, I worked at a law office owned by a white male sole practitioner, and he rented 2 offices in his suite to two other white men, one of whom worked from home, but just kept an office downtown to have a presence near the courthouse. And the other was like a wills and probate attorney I did not work for. And that attorney said a lot of homophobic, transphobic, and racist comments to me. He did say the N-word to my face. That story is too long to tell for your show. If we had been any place other than the office, I would have been gladly facing an assault charge. My boss was away for vacation for a week, and I told him when he came back what happened. And when he was out of the office again for a few days, the same attorney told me that his friends were starting a GoFundMe to help build the wall. And I replied that they can start that GoFundMe, but let me see it. And I promised my social media followers would get it shut down. And we got into a shouting match in the office. And I told my boss about it, and I put in a 60-day notice. And that was that. My replacement, I trained my replacement and I left. So if he had said something like that someplace else other than where I work, I would have gladly taken one for the team and punched him. And I told my boss that when he came back from vacation, and I told him what happened. I told him if we had been any place other than the office, I would have been in jail and probably would have been fired. The man probably would have taken a restraining order out on me or something. But if we had been any place else, I would have gladly been in a fight, because no one's going to say these things to me and not catch some hands. And that's just the bottom line. So I believe that how we respond to racism is a function of what we ourselves believe is an acceptable response to racism. Some people don't feel like a physical response is warranted. I'm not one of those people. And depending on what you say to me, I don't have a problem with going to jail. I have a clean criminal background. I've never been convicted of anything other than a speeding ticket in my life. I will gladly serve a few months of unsupervised probation to punch you in your face for calling me the N-word. However, if someone said that to me at work, it depending on where and what's going on, what my reaction will be. You might get punched out at work. I may report to HR. If I'm out on the street doing day-to-day life stuff, then yes, you're going to get hit.
No, that is...
And I'll try to destroy your career, too. And people who have followed me long enough, if you follow me long enough on social media, especially on Tumblr, I used to have some websites, but I was investing way too much time into that. But if you followed me for a length of time on Tumblr, there are some posts that are out there that list like school name, addresses, email addresses, and phone numbers for people to call in, voice their concerns and complaints about racist things that have happened that I've come across. And I do have 3 people that I've talked with online for, maybe 5 years that I know will send those emails out. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do. It just really depends on what you're willing to take and what you're not willing to take from people anywhere, whether it's direct or indirect. It doesn't have to happen to me for me to react to it.
Yeah, so I feel you there. Speaking of which, one of those heinous instances of white supremacy, racism, putting us through all this stuff this white Hartford, University of Hartford student in Connecticut did some of the most disgusting things to try to annoy and harm this black student, a black woman, without her knowing. And she apparently is bragging online about contaminating her belongings with bodily fluids, rubbing dirty tampons on the sister's backpack, putting her toothbrush, and I quote, in places where the sun doesn't shine.
And we all know that means the butt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the sister didn't kill her. She didn't assault her. And I'm not passing any judgment. I'm just saying what happened. But had she, I have a hard time blaming her.
I have a lot of thoughts on that one.
Bring it.
I don't know the circumstances of how she discovered it, other than a resident advisor. Someone saw the post and showed it to her. Mm-hmm. I don't know where she was when she saw it. Was she still in a dorm? I'm going to assume she was still on the campus. If there were other people around, that can affect how you respond when you discover something like that. And then there's the shock factor. When you discover something like that has happened, I can only imagine that she may have just completely frozen for a second, like, oh my gosh, maybe she read it a few times, and her roommate may not have been around at that very moment for her to do anything. Now, I can imagine if the roommate was 10 feet away, you know, maybe the response would have been different. So I don't know. I can say that, and she was a freshman, so she's not that far removed away from being a minor. Okay, so she's probably 18, maybe 19. Now, me, that's a fight. That's more than a fight. That's someone will have to pull me off of you, because I won't stop hitting you until my body can't swing anymore. What she did was beyond vile and extremely racist, very racist. And there's no one can erase the racism factor in what she did. There is nothing I can imagine anyone could do that would warrant a response like that. There was no history of any animosity in that roommate situation, except from that vile racist woman. She deserves what she's got coming to her. I believe the charges are not harsh enough. I have not looked up.
Never are. Yeah.
Right. I have not looked up the law in that state to see if any other felonies might apply to what she did. I believe a case could be made for assault depending on how the statute there is written. But that's just a really vile and disgusting, very disgusting things that girl did to her.
And she called this young black woman Jamaican Barbie on social media. She said that finally did it. Your girl got rid of her roommate. I can finally say goodbye, Jamaican Barbie. And then the black woman.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. That is where the racism and xenophobia comes into play. Nationality. The case can be made for the racism and xenophobia because she specifically highlighted a foreign country. I also think there might have been some jealousy at play there. To call her Barbie, maybe she was jealous that her roommate was thinner than her or pretty, and she viewed her as some type of competition with her. Maybe she knew her roommate was smarter than she was, and it just made her sick with jealousy. I believe that there are a lot of things that could be at play there just because of the way that she chose to phrase, in a negative way, Jamaican Barbie.
And when you said jealousy, I flashed back about a month to a young brother who was killed by at least three young white people. Maybe there was a fourth possible accomplice, and the brother's name was Xavier Lesko. He was 18 years old, and they just murdered him. And this dude, two-sport athlete, very popular. Most people in school loved him. And when I heard about this, I know some of that's jealousy. And to me, that goes back to slavery, because you had white explorers coming to Africa, not doing anything yet, just seeing the sights. And you can even find this online if you don't believe me. You had white explorers being quoted as saying, "Wow, this place is amazing. Towns are bigger than some of the largest towns in Europe. The riches here are so beautiful." Jealousy.
Mm-hmm. And greed.
And greed, of course. White greed is very, very, very powerful. And that brings us to our now weekly segment of who are we kicking out of Hollywood? White greed all over that in Hollywood. Since you're a guest, Tracy, you can have first dibs on who you're kicking out of Hollywood.
If I had known that, I would have had a name ready. There's too many to choose from. So we're going to pick on someone from Hollywood, huh?
Mm-hmm. Anybody in the last week? The Gal's is going nuts on social media. She's spilling hers before she even says them on air. So you better get one in now yourself, Tracy.
I am really interested in the tweets I'm seeing about Bryan Singer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
X-Men.
Sorry.
Right. I did not know he was affiliated with X-Men until his name came up in the tweets about sexually harassing people. And I've seen all of the X-Men films, but I don't follow the lives of famous people. I really just don't. Anyone that follows me on social media, I don't usually tweet it, famous people about whatever the case may be. And I don't fan over anyone. So I didn't know who he was. And when I saw that associated with X-Men, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I can't watch another X-Men film. And I just wonder, if, and apparently these are open secrets, everyone knows. And it just pisses me off that people continue working with these scumbags. And we know who's in the X-Men films. Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, and others. I think Anna Paquin, was she in those? No, I might be confused.
She was in the first set of the 21st century X-Men. Yeah. And
I just, like the people that work with Woody Allen, so while I am really happy that it's being brought forward, and I'm very supportive of the women and the men and people of all genders and sexualities are coming forward and speaking up, I want to know and hear from people that continue working with Woody Allen.
That's very troubling because he's very popular. He's so popular.
Any of them, no one who continues to make movies with him come forward to say exactly why they do, and I don't get it.
Well, I know that part of it is because of cachet. Because when you work, if you take the disgusting things that he has done, which you shouldn't, but the way, we are in this superficial Western society that we live in, when you work with Woody Allen on a film and he picks you, you obviously have to have some kind of acting chops because he, an Oscar, all these great films he's made. So you will have cachet going forward if you get picked in a Woody Allen film. And he's still making movies, still having people fund his movies. And what I'm going to say this really quickly, Mel Gibson is still allowed to do movies. I'm just going to say that he's still allowed to do movies. That he has not been accused of sexual assault, but that's harassment. That's just been driving me crazy. Gal, do you? Well, you just named like 40 on Twitter. Do you want to? I saw one that really made me sad. So
yeah, there's one that really made me sad, and that's Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Mm-hmm.
Kicking you out, Dustin Hoffman. Although you may have apologized for your alleged sexual harassment of a 17-year-old in 1985, your technical apology was, I'm sorry if I did that to you, and if I put you in an uncomfortable situation. No.
You know what, though? I think that it is that they do this so much, they don't even remember all the people they did it.
I completely agree with you. With Bryan Singer, there's an actual movie called Open Secrets. I don't know if you've seen it yet. It actually delves into it. It's from like 2010. Delves into the pedophilia and harassment and assaults that he is involved in. But that's the point. That going on to what you were saying, like they do it so much that they don't. Oh, you were 17 in 1985. Sorry about that. And
how disrespectful is that? Like if you see them again in public, the person who victimized you and hurt you, and they don't remember you,
right? You're supposed to. He was so 1985. That's right around Rain Man. That's right around his height. You should. This is of course the way they think. You should be happy if he assaulted you.
Oh.
It should be a compliment. I've heard people say shit like that, especially when it comes to the Hollywood elite.
Mm-hmm.
And like with Woody Allen, if you work with Dustin Hoffman, you get some street cred in Hollywood. Hoffman, I mean, so I'm looking at the tweets in your list, Gal. So The Graduate is gone. He's being kicked out of Hollywood.
Yep.
Frank Underwood is gone. I can't argue with either one.
You know what, Frank Underwood? You know why you're gone? For so many reasons, not even just one. Kevin Spacey.
Oh my gosh. He really threw LGBT people under the bus.
Exactly.
His statement is something that people from the right and homophobes are going to latch on to link being gay to
pedophilia.
And
whoever and his choice, right? He even put on there, I choose to live as a gay man now. Right. For fuck's sake.
That's what they've been saying for forever, to demonize gay people, to your point, Tracy.
Right. That he is, they're going to latch onto that wording to argue that being gay is choice. And whoever helped him write that statement, because I don't think he did it on his own. And if he did, he passed it off to someone to review before it got shared. They knew what they were doing. I believe it was very intentional. It was done with great purpose. And he absolutely deserves the loss of everything that he's losing. One of the questions I did pose on Twitter about Kevin Spacey was, would you rather see him kicked off the show and the show continue, or everyone on the show lose their job because of what he did? And no one responded to that question.
Can I respond? Because
Sure.
I am a watcher of House of Cards.
Mm-hmm.
Give the presidency to Mrs. Underwood and like kill off Kevin. But I don't know how it is. Okay, I'm halfway through season 5, so I don't even. Spoiler alert, everybody. For anybody who cares to watch the show, I don't know if he got impeached or not. So if he's still president, yeah, kill off the president and give it to Mrs. Underwood.
Again, we're talking about a show, FBI. See that sound bit being used.
Oh, really yeah. Oh, my goodness gracious. I'll be in a black site by tomorrow morning.
That was a good one.
Oh, boy, oh, boy.
I actually stopped watching at the end of, I don't even know, if it was 3 or 4. It was the season that she asked for a divorce. And the first episode of the next season just didn't catch me. It was just, I was completely bored out of my mind and I never watched it again. So I haven't been watching it.
I've only got through the first 2 episodes and I got bored.
It can't get boring. I mean, we talk about politics on this show.
But some of my favorite movies, have Kevin Spacey in it. So, I mean,
sure.
Even if I'm not a fan of House of Cards, there's plenty of...
American Beauty, one of the greatest
7?
films. Yeah. 7 was great.
Usual Suspects?
I've posed this question myself, and I've talked about my own thoughts on this. Hollywood. I mean, we like the list that I have on my attached to my Twitter that Gal and I went through a couple weeks back. Most of Hollywood, of any color, any creed, are horrible people. So, I mean, if we are going to be like, and I wouldn't blame anybody if they are, I'm not going to watch that show. I'm not going to listen to that album. I'm not going to watch that movie. I can't listen to James Brown anymore because he beat up women. Now, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't listen to James Brown for that reason. But have you listened to James Brown? I can't help but strut around and move a little bit when I listen to James. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Kevin Spacey, House of Cards, American Beauty, 7. Great pieces of entertainment, that we're just going to... So y'all speak on this, because I've spoke on this a lot, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. Well,
I believe in cutoff culture. I will cut someone off so fast in my personal life. So I absolutely don't hesitate to do it in terms of what I choose to consume for entertainment. And probably because I just don't fan over people. And I'm really not impressed with any singer, any actor. Of course, I like to see people like Denzel Washington succeed because he's put out a great body of work.
Please don't do anything, Denzel, please.
I know, right? Because I will just die. So although I appreciate his work, there are movies he's put out that I haven't seen. Will Smith has movies he's put out I haven't seen. But I have appreciated the acting that he's done that I have seen. My daughter is in entertainment. She was asked to be in a Chris Brown video. She's been in the studio with him. It pisses me off to the highest point of festivity that he wants my daughter to be in a video of his. She blocked me on Facebook when I went in on Chris Brown. My daughter had blocked on Facebook. She was in the studio watching him write a song while he was there in the studio and was raving about how fast he wrote this song. And it's actually on that new album he just released. And so I wouldn't say she was singing his praises, but it was clear that she was in awe of watching that work be produced. And, I kind of went in on Chris Brown and she blocked me on Facebook. And then next thing I know, she's been asked to work with him. I will never listen to Chris Brown. I can't tell you a single song this man does. I have no idea. Kanye West, don't like him. Can't name a single song by him at all. And I really just don't have a problem with not consuming the products of people I just don't like. I can't see throwing money at people who believe certain behaviors are okay. So it might be easier for me than perhaps other people because I really just don't fan over people like that.
Mm-hmm.
I fan over people like that, but I also do cut out culture completely. I mean, family members, friends, doesn't matter. I haven't talked to my own siblings in 7 years. And so I do the same thing. I mean, if it doesn't matter. I'll never be able to watch Seven again. 4 men have come out now. Not just the one that we had originally heard about, which is Anthony Rapp, who's on the new Star Trek. 4 men have come out alleging Kevin Spacey sexually harassed them. And on one note, with the Anthony Rapp case specifically, The Advocate, which is an LGBT magazine, knew about the Anthony Rapp allegation back in the 90s and didn't ever say anything about it. They're a fucking magazine for LGBT.
Mm-hmm.
So, no.
And it's a choice, according to Kevin Spacey's file behind.
They were all on our producer just made a good point that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with him being gay, more or less that it does that they were underage. That's pedophilia is when pre-puberty. It's a different word that I can never remember.
I think they have like 4, right? There's like 4 terms.
Yeah.
Age range.
The ages I've seen are 14, 16, and 17 so far, so they wouldn't be pedophilia. Well, statutory rape, but that means these are assaults that it looks like they weren't luckily completed. Not luckily, it's still not a good word in that sense. Attempts are what they look at. Then we also have Brett Ratner is also on my list, who is he's actually got a long body of work, but probably best known for Prison Break. He's the director of Prison Break and a filmmaker who has had 6 women come out this week of sexual harassment or misconduct, one being Olivia Munn, who is an actress. I don't know, you might know.
The Newsroom, yeah.
So he's on my list. Of course, Andy Dick has always been out of Hollywood in my mind, but he has been fired from the film he was working on after sexual harassment claims.
He's still making.
I have to completely agree with you on that.
And I actually, this is going to shock everybody, but before this, I actually kind of liked Andy Dick. He was goofy and ridiculous. I kind of liked the stuff a little bit. Yeah, the news radio of R.I.P. Phil Hartman. I thought he was a funny guy, but
yeah,
you
can directly relate Phil Hartman's death to Andy Dick as well, though.
Really?
Yeah, Andy Dick is who got his wife back hooked on drugs consistently, and then would constantly rub it in Phil Hartman's face.
Oh man!
No, I'm not saying he's obviously not the one who pulled the trigger, but
no, that's still important to the story.
That's something I did not know.
Yeah.
Oh, that goes to my whole point, though. Like I wouldn't. I talked about this because of the whole Kaepernick protest and why I'm not boycotting the NFL. Granted, I have watched less games this year than I have ever watched. I used to work in sports media and cover the dang sport, but I was just, there's so many things, especially in this society and in white culture, that we can't do anymore if we just, okay, well, that's evil. I can't do that. I can't. We could not watch anything on Fox ever again of any show because Fox itself is evil.
I don't watch any Fox anything anyway, ever. I don't care what is on Fox. I do.
Okay, what about ABC, Disney? Anti-Semite, FBI informant.
Right. I don't watch Disney. I
ABC.
don't play.
ABC owns Disney.
Well, I don't have a TV.
Disney owns ABC.
Right. I don't.
Oh, did I say? Just Disney owns ABC. Excuse me.
And actually, see, I didn't know that either. But I don't have a television in my house, and I screen what I put on the computer for my grandchildren when they are here. I screened what my children watched growing up. So, like, I think The Simpsons was a big deal or something when my kids were little. And they asked me about The Simpsons, and I guess there were maybe 10 or something. Hell no. I think my kids were like 16 before they saw an episode of The Simpsons. And so I really screened their music and their television growing up. And now that I am so much more critical of media, I find myself really repulsed because I've gone back over some shows that I've seen before. I became really aware, like Desperate Housewives, and I was sickened by some of the storyline. The character Gabby was having an affair with her lawn person who was 16 at the time it started.
Oh my goodness gracious!
And I think 17 when the show first came out, but it came out somewhere in the story that he was 16 when it started. And like True Blood, I went back and just finished that maybe a few days ago, and I just wanted to vomit because I'm looking at things now that I've actually been made aware of things I hadn't considered before. So it's difficult. And I know that there's no way that you can watch anything, any type of entertainment that isn't tainted somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I get that. I've never been a fan of the NFL. And we're going to blame my father for that, Nolan, for taking over the one TV in the house.
Oh, okay.
To watch the Oakland Raiders. And then it was the Lakers and the Cincinnati Reds. And we couldn't watch TV when he was home because his game was on.
Mm-hmm. My sister was the same way. My little sister was the same way. She ended up hating sports because everyone else in the house would watch it all the time. Yeah.
Right.
I got you.
So it's easy for me to boycott the NFL. I don't go to any Tennessee Titans games. The tickets that have been given to me, I've given away. So that's easy for me to avoid. But I do what I can where I can. And I think it's very unrealistic to cut off all forms of media because it's a part of life. And
we'd be left with just about nothing. A ball in a cup or tiddlywinks or solitaire.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't really navigate through life without media. Mm-hmm. It's how we learn about what's going on in the world. Mm-hmm. But I am learning to be much more discerning. And quite frankly, it's just something you have to teach your kids, how to discern what's okay and what's not okay.
Which is very key. Because, what do they say? The children are our future? I don't know if they're still saying that. That's what they said when I was a child. So I am now the future. The future has become the present.
Mm-hmm. And I actually think that things are worse now that I am closer to 50 than 40 than when I was a teenager.
From the standpoint of what the entertainment output is or the people in entertainment?
Well, in terms of, and it, like I said, this could be a function of media too, in terms of actually all of American life, every aspect of my life. We have instant access to so much information. So it could be a much more quick and sudden awareness of what's going on. But even in my direct experiences with people day to day, just life in general, my life now that I'm approaching 50 is much more challenging, difficult, and stressful than what I experienced in earlier years. Now, that's just me and my experience.
Well, I think also the other thing is the access to media that no one's ever had before at this high rate. You can find things out that you wouldn't know previously. I learned about Michael Jackson's mega child pornography collection online, even though the LAPD knew that years ago. Granted, I think also they didn't. It wasn't released for a while, but point being, you learn things you wouldn't otherwise learn.
See, I've not heard that Michael Jackson, that law enforcement, LAPD, discovered that.
Oh, it was the whole. I know. I mean, LAPD. I mean, they're.
I've seen people say it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I've never seen any actual proof.
No, it's vanity. It's out there. It's all over.
No, I've seen the Vanity Fair article, but they had no proof. Whenever.
Oh, you mean like actual, like in your hand, yeah. Like where's it? Okay. Well,
yeah. But you're going to see that with all of these, of course.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, for a lot of the things we just talked about in the cases, but I wouldn't put it past the LAPD to make something up. But even still, a lot of accusers. Yeah, and the accusers. One thing I've learned in my last couple of years, and like getting into the movement myself, is if you're going to believe someone, the accuser versus the alleged abuser, you want to lean towards the accuser, because just the rates of someone making it up versus the actual assault. The actual assaults far outweigh the made up accusations. But
and I usually it's about 2% of accusations end up being false, but I do want to state that with the Michael Jackson case, the two main boys in that admitted once they were of age that their parents made them do that for money. So you do get a different situation going on there when you come into the actual investigations that went on there and the case at hand, and of course the time period at hand.
Yes.
Especially when you look at the satanic panic that was going on, which could be a whole other show we don't have enough time for. But directly affecting the atmosphere at the time. It's an interesting case to really look into, and believe me, I 99.9%, almost 100%, will always believe an accuser in the sense that I know the statistics. That case is a bit different.
It is. You're right. The whole bizarro world of Michael Jackson is different from any normal reality, so that I completely agree with you there. But speaking of another show, another time, we are out of time, and on November the 1st, 2017, I want to thank Tracy for coming on again. A wonderful guest, per usual. You can follow her at Viva La Diva Tracy with a Y on Twitter, Viva La Diva Tracy, and Gal, Nolan, myself, and Tracy will all say goodbye to you, and Gal and I will see you next week we'll be 30 minutes earlier, 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 Eastern on People's Radio United next week on Wednesday. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.